you need an avatar to come down and set things right. Like Krishna says, whenever there is a challenge, I will, take avatar repeatedly. So one particular avatar of Mahavishnu had to manifest to put an end to this menace. The path that says Krishna is wrong, he does not exist, he's not an avatar, which is completely different from what our dharma tells us, and then say that is equally valid. I wanted to show what does our dharma actually say. How do we define our soul, our atma? What is the connection of the jivatma with the paramatma?
Namaste, all. Thank you for watching Sangam Talks. Well, this conversation is going to be one of a kind because we are having an author, Ranjit Radhakrishnanji, who is going to speak about his debut, Rama of the X. So Ranjit Radhakrishnanji is a Bangalore-based entrepreneur. He is an ex-actor, assistant director, script assistant, toll manager, and pretty much everything else. He's a father to a brat and husband to a wife who loves dogs, cats, cows, elephants, and her husband and other animals, strictly in that order. He loves grandmother's tales and stories from our Puranas and Itihasas. He is a proud pagan and an ardent idol worshipper. He drinks a lot of tea, as every right thinking person should do. That's what he says. So, thank you so much, Ranjit Radhakrishnanji, for joining us today and to giving us an opportunity to record your motivation to pick Parshuram as a subject for your first book, which is, by the way, just the first part. And currently, Ranjit ji is writing the second part of the book. So, in this captivating saga, Ranjit Radhakrishnanji foregrounds lesser known aspects of the life of warrior sage Parshurama. What we have is a tale that presents to us a hero for the ages, a man who is much more complex and interesting than an angry avenger. A saga of revenge, love, and duty. Rama of the X is the story of Rambhadra's journey to becoming Parshurama, the sixth avatar of Mahavishnu. So, with this, would directly like to begin the discussion.
I'll give you a little bit of a background of my writing journey also. I started out with a short story of mine being published in this anthology called Unsung Valor. And while we were working on the workshop of that book, we were told that, you're getting published by Bloomsbury, so you've got a foot in the door into the publication side of the books. So maybe you guys should try writing a book. And the first thought that came into my mind was, if I have to write about something, maybe I should write about Parshurama. And looking at the feedback I got, reviews matter. If people are looking at this, please do leave your reviews on Amazon, Goodreads, wherever possible. Authors do read them, and you get so much encouragement from it, and you learn once you pick up points from there that it helps them in their writing journey. So once I saw those reviews, I thought I should go ahead and write this book. And it wasn't until I was maybe 6 or 7 chapters into the book that I thought for myself, why did I pick this particular character? Why was Parashurama the first name that sprung into my mind when I wanted to write a book? So it's only then that I started to think about it. And thinking back, I realized that between 1999 to 2003, there were a series of deaths in my family. And there is this one particular temple that we go to perform the last rites or the first anniversary of the passing away. And this was a small temple on the outskirts of Thiruvananthapuram. Now, I've stayed in Thiruvananthapuram for about 2 years, and I've gone to all the major temples there. But this particular temple, nobody mentioned to me, and I wasn't even aware. And it is a Parashurama temple. He's the deity there, and he's supposed to be facing the most famous temple in Trivandrum, that is Anantapadmanabha Swami. So he's supposed to be facing that Murti. So when I went there and I did the last rites and I finished the ritual and I was coming back, and that's when my interest in this sixth avatar, grew a little bit more. I knew the basic story, but I didn't know much about him at all. And I started researching on him, and it was a very fascinating story to me. So over the years, I've been, picking up tidbits about him from here and there, and I realized that there is no book about him at all. The first book I read about him was written by this great man called K.M. Munshi. I think he was Home Minister of Gujarat after independence, and he is one of the forces behind the reconstruction of the Somnath temple. So he's written a book called Bhagwan Parshuram, and this was published in 1965. Then around 30, 40 years later, there was another book. They were all dealing with Parashurama as a human being who did great, a whole lot of spectacular stuff when he was alive. But to me, he was a divinity. He's an avatar. And I wanted to write him that way. So that's how the motivation to write the story came about. And there's so much lore attached to him. There are so many terms that I use specifically for him that, I thought that when I had to write this, I had to try and give the reader a complete picture of what the avatar appears to me. Okay. And I wanted to keep the bhakti in the book. So it took me around 10 months, 11 months to write the story. And it took me more than 2 years to get it published. And it finally came out in May of this year.
Right.
And thankfully, the reception has been really great. We are on our second reprint. And the first print run was sold out in a couple of days. So I'm really, really grateful to the readers for that. I think by this month end, after Onam, which is on 29th, I think we should be announcing the third reprint. So thank you to all the readers.
As you have already said, sir, that you also did not know about Parshurama much, despite you having your roots from Kerala. So that eventually brings me to my second question, sir. Why isn't Parshurama is as widely revered? Why are his awe-striking tales of being a one-man army not as profoundly recorded as Mahabharata and Ramayana?
Very good question, because this struck me too when I was writing the story. There is a lot of stories about Parashurama, but very little literature. We don't have a Parashuramayana. If you want to know about Sri Rama, you read the Ramayana, whether it is Ramcharitmanas or
Exactly.
Valmiki Ramayana. You want to know about Sri Krishna, you have the Harivamsha, you have the Bhagavatam, you have a whole lot of stories connected to him. But there's no such one book about Parashuram. So there are a whole lot of stories which are from across the length and breadth of the country, but one book is missing. So I don't know, maybe we would discover something. Maybe there is some set of scrolls with some family who will find it and release it to the public, and then finally we'll get to know. Somewhere the spotlight, the superstars, if I have to speak that way, are Sri Krishna and Sri Rama, and we don't have too much about the guy who came before them.
Right.
So in a way, it's good for me as a writer, because I get to present aspects of him that may not be that well known. Because I come from Kerala, and there is this thing, there is a term that they use saying God's own country. I don't know how many people realize which is the God that gave them the country. The most popular tale of Parashurama down here is how he raised the land from the sea to form the entire Konkan coast, from Kanyakumari to Gokarna or Goa. There's other stuff also attached to it. I'll come to that later. So a very intriguing character who appears in the Ramayana briefly, who appears in the Mahabharata briefly. He's most well known, I think, for executing his mother. And we are told he's a very, very angry man. And this is the general perception about him. But we are also told somewhere he's going to be the Saptarishi for the next Manvantara, which is an astounding thing to be, bestowed on someone, because that means there's a great deal of learning there. And there's also a particular term that is associated with him that's called Brahma Kshatriya. You don't hear this being associated with anybody else. It's sort of reserved for him only. And on top of this, he's a Chiranjeevi, which means he's one of the 7, or if you count Markandeya, is one of the 8. And so much has been done by this character. And, somehow we're missing all this. We have that image of an angry guy with an axe. And that too was a very surprising thing. You have a lot of people who do tapasya and penance, and they get divyastras from the gods. And this is all Brahmastra and, Agneya and all this stuff. But he's given an axe. There is nobody who's got an axe from Mahadeva before. So why was he given an axe? Was there a specific, some significance to the axe that's been given to him? In certain tantric forms of Ganapati, you will see the axe being held by him. Ma Durga has an axe. but you don't see it anywhere else. So just like, Sudarshan Chakra is associated with Sri Krishna, you have the axe that's been associated with Ramabhadra, and the association is so strong that now he's called Parshurama, literally Rama of the axe. Okay, so I mean, that's how the name of the book came about, because the association with his weapon is so strong. We tend not to see the spiritual aspects of him. We rather see him as this warrior, and he was a fantastic warrior. The whole Mahabharata Yuddha that lasted for 18 days, and you had 18 Akshahunis being killed in those 18 days. Parashurama was a single warrior who took on 21 Akshahunis and finished them off in 3 days. So it is his prowess is off the charts. Okay, I think a little bit of why he's not that widely regarded as being that great an author is because of the lack of literature in the first place, and the incident where he meets Sri Rama, that has been given a particular color there, and that his avatar, his purpose of his avatar is over. But we forget that he's the only avatar that has met Sri Krishna and Sri Rama, and who's going to be the guru of the 10th avatar. So he continues to play a part. We still don't know what that is going to be. So it's such a fascinating character that, writing part 2, I don't know where to stop. How much to include in the book and how much to leave out, because the saga is continuing. Let's see how it shapes out. So, I mean, that's how I got to, writing about him, and my interest. I think it would be an enduring interest. I don't think I'm ever going to leave Parashurama, or Parashurama intends to leave me in this life.
As you rightly said that you have presented Parshurama in your perspective in the book. In that regard only, sir, is this story completely based upon Puranic scriptures of Parshurama, or is there also an element of creative freedom being at play in the book? And how's your story different from mythological fiction, which are very much produced or written nowadays?
A lot of people get offended when we say mythological fiction. There's no disrespect meant here at all, especially when the book comes out in categories like this. Now, we don't have a category that says Itihas. They follow BISAC codes. They're decided from traditional publishing, and we have to put it in separate categories. So you either have myth, fable, and sagas, you have religious fiction, spiritual fiction, you have something like this. And when they see mythology and fiction, people get offended a lot. There's no disrespect that way. It's just, you have to put the book into certain categories for it to reach the right kind of reader. I depended on the Brahmanda Purana for Parashurama's story. You see, there are different versions of his story in different books. In fact, the names of his brothers also change from book to book. So rather than getting into a whole confused mess there, I decided to stick to one book. And there was a Malayalam version of it available with my uncle, so I borrowed it from him. And I started reading it in Malayalam. So this was a good thing for me, because I was getting back in touch with my mother tongue, and I was reading heavily Sanskritized Malayalam there. And that Brahmanda Puranam had been compiled by a very great Malayalam writer called Akitam Achyutan Nambudiri, who's a Sahitya Academy Award winner, Jnanapith Award winner. I think he passed away in 2022. So very grateful to him for that book. So I based the basic plot line on the Brahmanda Purana. But when I was writing my story, there was some creative freedom that I took, especially with the timeline. Parashurama spends years in tapasya. I didn't want to extend the time frame in the book to that many years. So I have sort of compressed the timeline. Origin stories of a few secondary characters have been changed a little bit to convey what I want to convey, but nowhere in the book have I presented Parashurama as anything less than an avatar. A lot of the fiction that we are writing now today is we are looking back at these figures from the Puranas, and we are trying to rationalize what they did. When we say that science and spirituality are like parallel lines, and they may meet at a point in the future somewhere, the distance, I try not to bring science into spirituality as much as possible. Finally, it is a matter of faith. And we are told that he is the sixth avatar. So why should I not write or present a story of the sixth avatar in a modern way without compromising on the bhakti I have for him? So when I read books based on characters from our Puranas, uh, we are told that he was a great human being, and over the time, people regarded him as God. Okay, so I'm all for modern retellings and taking your creative liberty as long as you do not, warp the character itself so much that he's unrecognizable from what we know in the Puranas or the Itihasas. So that one particular thing is always, stuck in my mind. I can't make that jump when you say, he was a great person and then he came to be regarded as God. So to me, that sounds very, very close to atheism when you're saying that you're almost implying that there's no divinity. It's just great human beings that we regard as gods. Okay, great human beings, you can learn lessons from their lives, the trials that they went through. You can do all this, but somehow I do not want to touch the divinity aspect of it at all. So in my book, I have not tried to rationalize the events that have happened. I've tried to give you an explanation. But that explanation is based on spirituality, on mysticism, on divinities that bless and support human beings who are on the path of dharma. So there is divinity in my book. There is what we loosely call supernatural elements in this book, but these are part of folk tales that are associated with Parashurama and don't find a part in the Purana, especially when it comes to his mother, Renuka Devi. Renuka Devi is a Kul Devi for a lot of people in North Karnataka and South Maharashtra. There's a very famous temple to her in Saundatti. There's also a temple to her in Himachal or Uttarakhand. I'm not sure which place it is. And every Ekadashi, there is a festival where Parashurama comes down to meet his mother. He's carried on a palanquin.
Sorry, sir, you said Saundatti.
Saundatti.
Saundatti. Is it in Belgaum
Yes.
territory?
Yes.
North Karnataka,
North
primarily.
Karnataka, yeah. Yeah. And it's so fascinating that the lore has reached, there's a connection in Uttarakhand where on a particular Ekadashi, they carry the murti of Bhagwan Parshuram down to a particular lake. It's on that Ekadashi he comes to meet his mother. It's a very beautiful story. So, it's across the length and breadth of India. You have a Parshuram Kund or Parshuram Tal in Arunachal Pradesh, where he's supposed to have, tried to expel the blood from his axe. So the axe has a very particular distinctive trait that it drinks blood of all the people that he kills with it. So and it grows heavier with time, and he's trying to dispel the blood. So there is supposed to be a particular lake where he's supposed to have done that. Kurukshetra was known by a name before this, Samanta Panchaka, because of 5 lakes of blood that Parashurama expelled from his axe there. We have a place in Karnataka called Aihole, where the river is supposed to have turned red because Parashurama washed his axe there. So you can see the range of the stories that are connected with this particular avatar. And I thought, not bringing divinity into it or spirituality into it would not be doing justice to him. So that's how it's different from how it's written usually nowadays, where even if you're an avatar or you're presented as a mortal, there's no divinity in you. Somewhere I'm not very comfortable with it, because finally we are told that, our Atma is the spark of a divine in all of us. And the divine exists in all creation. So when you take it out, for me, the story becomes very dry.
As you are just mentioning about the range of Parshurama. So, sir, what would be the Parshurama's territory?
Okay.
There have been stories where people mention that it has not only limited to Indian subcontinent, present-day Indian subcontinent, but there are some reminiscences which are found outside India also.
Yeah.
So, according to you, sir, what would have been Parshurama's territory per se? If you can throw some light upon this, as well as the story of Kerala also, if you can just
Yeah.
add it to this.
So we have this popular tag for Kerala called God's own country. So the God that gave them the country is Bhagwan Parshuram. And it's not limited to Kerala. It's all the way from Kanyakumari to Gokarna or Goa. That's called Parashurama Kshetra actually. But there have been theories that, this extends all the way, the coastline from Maharashtra, Gujarat, Pakistan, Afghanistan, all the way to Persia. That is Parashurama Kshetra. There are theories that way. And some people try and connect it back to the first war that we see in the Rig Veda. That's the Battle of the 10 Kings. And Sudasa wins that war against 10 kings who are, attacking him. And they're expelled. Some move westwards. And there's a particular tribe that's moved to Persia, and they become the Persians later on. It becomes a Zend-Avesta there. They have their own lord. So they are also considered part of, connected to the Bhrigu clan. There's some theory that way. But the Purana that I refer to mentions only this part, from Goa or Gokarna to Kanyakumari. So I've stuck with that for the purposes of the book. The other lore is fascinating in itself. Hopefully something more comes about it, and, we can have another set of stories regarding that.
Sir, as you mentioned that there was a mention of Parshurama in Vedas also.
Yeah.
And also Parshurama is supposed to be the only avatar, correct me if I'm wrong, who is present in the greatest epics also, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Just for the benefit of our younger audience, if you can just throw some light upon his mentions in the great epics and also in Vedas if possible.
That's a fascinating aspect of Parshuram, because there is a Vedic hymn that has been attributed to him. It's a hymn that in praise of Saraswati, Bharati, and Ila, 3 goddesses who have now, somehow being considered as Saraswati herself now. Now, he's an avatar of Mahavishnu. He's one of the greatest devotees of Mahadeva. So there's this theory floating around now that the greatest devotee of Mahadeva was Ravan. There's no comparison at all. Probably the greatest devotee of Mahadeva would be Nandi. You find him in every Shiva temple almost. Somewhere up there would be Parashuram for sure, much higher than Ravan, because Ravan finally did not follow the path of Dharma, and he's not an avatar. So, and curiously enough, there are tantric texts that have attributed to Parashurama too. There is something called the Parashurama Kalpa Sutra, which gives you a ritualistic view on how to do certain tantric practices. And he's also a disciple of an Avaduta, Guru Dattatreya. I don't know how many people know this. I don't know if this is popular up north. I was surprised when I read it too, because Dattatreya is guru to both Parashurama as well as Kartavir Arjuna. And now he's connected to the Nath Sampradaya. So you can see him, almost everywhere, right from Veda, Tantra to, the Nath Sampradaya. It's fascinating how many, probably this is why they call him a Chiranjeevi or something, because he's been able to collect the knowledge from all these various paths to approach the divine, the supreme. And probably this is the learning that he's going to impart to the 10th avatar when he meets him. And he's the only avatar that has met 2 subsequent avatars. We are not told about the 9th, which is again a mystery. But he does make an appearance in the Ramayana, and he does make an appearance in the Mahabharata. He meets Sri Rama after his marriage with Sita Devi on the way back to Ayodhya. And there's a particular color that's been given to the meeting. Because Parashurama comes there in a rage. So I'm writing about that in part 2 of the book. So I'm not giving away how I'm writing that. And I think Bhagwan Parshuram is part of the peace mission along with Sri Krishna before the Kurukshetra war, when he goes and appeals to the Kauravas and says, give them what they deserve, have peace, don't go for war. And Parshurama tells the Kauravas that you cannot overcome Nara and Narayana, despite you having Bhishma, Drona, Karna, all of this, it's not going to work. So listen to me. Of course, it falls on deaf ears. They don't listen to him. And the interesting aspect of it is that most people think there are 2 disciples of Parashurama in the Mahabharata. 3, Bhishma, Drona, and Karna. Now, There are a few more. I think there are 7. I don't remember all the names. There was this person called Rukmi, who was the brother of Rukmini. And he was a very boastful character and finally he had to sit out the war because neither the Kauravas wanted him nor the Pandavas. And there was a Pandyan king from Tamil Nadu who took part in the Mahabharata war called Malayadwaja. He was a disciple of Parashurama too. And I think there are a couple more. I can't recollect the names right now. Funnily enough, we're not told anything about the 9th avatar. Parashurama meet him. Was there something to it? Maybe there is a story that we have lost to time, or maybe we'll rediscover it with time. But we do know that he would be meeting the 10th avatar and he's going to be the guru to Bhagwan Kalki. So, there's no appropriate place to put a stop to his story. So what I can try and do in part 2 is to try and show you different aspects of him, where he's not just this angry warrior who's always there with the axe out to do it. Now Parashurama is also going to be a future Saptarishi. He cannot be just an angry avatar who's always bloodthirsty. There has to be some deep spiritual wisdom within him to be elevated to such a status.
Definitely, and one will actually be able to see this once they go through the book, that it's not just about being someone who roams around angry and just killing Kshatriyas for no reason, or probably for dharma. So there are also tales wherein or probably two sides of story, two different school of thoughts, where one side says that the Parshurama mentioned in Mahabharata and Ramayana are not same. So what are your thoughts on that, sir?
Yeah, that's a particular school of thought which says that either the children of a particular rishi took on his name or his disciples did. So you find a lot of people living for thousands of years in our Puranas. Vishwamitra is there. Vishwamitra happens to be the grand uncle of Parashurama. So they say these are different people going by the same name. And now the Puranas are not very explicit about this. They tell you that they lived for thousands of years. Okay, I'm going with that because I'm fascinated by the longevity of one character who is witness and who plays an important part in so much of our stories. To me, that is more fascinating than having different people using the same name and continuing the tradition, or maybe having different being part of different stories. To me, it's fascinating to have the one person there, because there's so much of personal experience and so much of wisdom that's coming down in that one person that you can hold, rather than have a sampradaya of people who are called by the same name. To have one person is more interesting to me. So that's how I have played it out in my book. I have not gone the route where they say it's different people who have the same name.
So the book is a living prophecy, is how I felt when I read the book. And there are songs and poems in the book, which is boiling down to the same point of the prophecy, which is unbecoming, die, and becoming. So how a layman should construe it, sir? How a layman should understand this prophecy?
There are 2 answers to this. The easy, simple, short answer is, please read my book. Here it is. This is Rama of the Axe. Available on Amazon, Flipkart, Padega India, please, and in bookstores all across. When I was writing the book, and I told you there's, divinity and what you may call supernatural elements in it. There was one particular scene, to express it openly, that particular incident where he has to execute his mother, and to bring out his emotions and to bring out the impact of that particular scene, I thought there has to be some kind of a lyric or a song there. We are a people of songs. We have songs for almost everything. You take it the Navarasa, you have songs for each and every rasa. Every bhava you have a song. You have songs for the morning, afternoon, evening, night, on waking up, on sleeping, when you're born, when you grow up, when you're getting married, everything you have a song for. But we don't find songs in our books. Somehow, that poetic part of it gets missed out because it's supposed to be just prose. And I get where the reader is coming from, because a lot of modern poetry, to be very blunt, it really sucks. I mean, you can't read it. I mean, I don't know. They make it as obscure as possible, and you're searching for meaning in I don't know what. So I didn't want to go that way. I wanted to be clear, and I wanted to convey the message of the scene and the impact of the scene. So which is why I started writing that lyric for that. The lyric came from the prophecy because I wanted to show you that, the book is not just about Bhagwan Parshuram. The story is not just about him, but it is one prophecy that is connecting so many people. The same prophecy is applicable to Arjuna. It's applicable to Renuka, to whom the prophecy is told, to Parashurama. In a way, it is also applicable to Parashurama's disciple, Akrita, and in a way also to Jamadagni. So that one prophecy is hitting a lot of people, though you're explicitly told that it's only one person. Okay, so we have this teaching in our culture that you have to recognize your true self. You're not what you perceive yourself to be. You have to take off the layers of ego, ahamkara, mind, to realize what you really are. So you are, in that sense, unbecoming what you think you are. And there is an ego death that happens to you before you realize the truth and become one with the Supreme. So that's where I got the terms, to unbecome, to die, to become. And you have a lot of this in the Nath Sampradaya, where you're literally told, die, yogi, die. It's only then, die while you're living. It's only then that you realize the truth. So that's where that particular phrase came from. And writing the lyric for this book was, so liberating for me that, I could write something like this. That when there was another anthology called Arya that came out in the beginning of this year in January. So there was this particular story from the Mahabharata that I was writing on. And I wrote the whole thing as a poem, as a lyric. The entire story of it became a lyric because I thought, it warranted a lyric. And I didn't want people to get turned off by poetry and say, we have no idea what this man wants to say. Some words put together, jumble, can mean anything for anybody. I said, it can be written in a way that's, easily readable, that conveys a story. When I was in school, there was this very famous poem, The Highwayman. I think that's the first poem that made an impression on me, because I was like everybody else, what is this poem? I have no idea what's happening here. But that told you a story and actually made you feel for that man and the girl who was waiting for him. So that's so beautifully said. So poems can actually get you involved in the story and, evoke emotions in you. So I wanted to try that and bring it into that very, very dramatic scene, which is how I started writing the lyric, and I use the prophecy throughout. It's the prophecy that you see always circles back to one particular point, and it's applicable for all of them. So when people ask me, why do you write about Parshuram? I say, no, it's not just about Bhagwan Parshurama. It's about Renuka Devi. It's about the Saptarishi Jamadagni as well as Kartavya Arjuna. It's the story is about all four of them.
So my next question is, who is a Brahma Kshatriya? As you have mentioned that Parshurama is a Brahma Kshatriya, and there have been, even though very rare, but there have been Brahma Kshatriyas in the past as well, sir, even before Parshurama or after him?
Somehow this particular term is connected most closely with him. Like the Parashu the axe is connected with Parshurama. Brahma Kshatriya has been associated with him. And the definition that I looked up was, sort of half Brahmin, half Kshatriya, who has the qualities of both. That means Shastra as well as Shastra. But if you look at it that way, Sri Krishna, who's called Yogeshwara himself, can also be a Brahma Kshatriya. If you're not looking at avatars, if you look at one of our greatest warriors like Arjuna, he also can be a Brahma Kshatriya. But this term is not associated with them at all. It is associated with just this one person, mainly. He's a Brahma Kshatriya. And there's this origin story where, Richika's wife wanted a yogi and her mother wanted a yodha, and somehow the thing got mixed up. And so you had a Kshatriya born with Brahmin qualities who went on to become Vishwamitra. And you had a Kshatriya born with Brahmin qualities, and you had a Brahmin born with Kshatriya qualities who became Parshuram. So there is this kind of explanation given. But we are told repeatedly in our stories that The varna depends upon your guna and your karma. It is not on your birth.
Right.
There has to be something more to the term Brahma Kshatriya than this. So I have given a different explanation to what Brahma Kshatriya is in my story. I've had somebody, one character, explain that after certain incidents in the book. I don't want to reveal it right here. I'd like feedback on whether you think that's valid once you read the book, because I didn't want to tie it to caste or varna or jati or anything there. I wanted to be guna and karma alone. And how Parashurama is deserving of this phrase is what I wanted to convey through the explanation I've given.
As you said, that Varna is totally based on one's ability and one's will. So, considering that chain of thought, anyone can become a Brahma Kshatriya if he feels like, not like can become, but aspire to become one.
Yeah, yeah.
So, how exactly this particular blessing is bestowed on one particular person and not the others? What would be the traits? What would be the precedence to become a Brahma Kshatriya?
I'd like the reader to read that particular part of the book where I give you an explanation of why the term Brahma Kshatriya is associated with Parashurama, because of certain things that he does, that he learns, he self-realizes to do. I would actually look forward to feedback from that, to see if that explanation or the creative liberty I've taken to give you an explanation for that particular term sits well with you. So I'd like the reader to let us know in their comments once they see this and read the book.
It was also very intriguing to notice that two staunch rivalries like Arjuna or Rama, they have the common guru lineage associated with them. So, sir, would you have something to say on that?
I'd like to address this answer to people who claim that Ravana is the greatest devotee of Mahadeva, like I mentioned before. See, there's no hiding from a divinity. You can't go and lie to Mahadeva. You can tell him what he wants, but he already knows what, who you are, what your actual aim is, and how you're going to turn out to be. So when you have a spiritual practice, when you have, you're engaged in rigorous sadhana, and you want to get darshan of a particular deity, or you want the blessings of a particular form of the divine, you've put in that much effort. You have asked him for the boon, and in his divine or her divine grace, they have bestowed the blessings upon you. How you then use those blessings becomes very, very important. Now, Kartavirarjuna was somebody who undertook enormous tapasya to, get what he wanted. And he asked for boons that, somehow, once he realized the power and the extent of his strength, started to, turn against everybody else, and was only for the glorification of the self. With Parashurama, with the same guru, he did not do that for self-glorification or to become a samrat or to become, which is why we worship him as an avatar today, because what he did was within the confines of dharma, was to protect and to establish it. While the other person started off good, but once he reached the pinnacle was when he fell, actually. When ego started to, grow in him, when he thought that everything he does right is dharma because he's doing it, so everything started to flow from his self. The self was more important than what was he doing for, establishing the path shown by the rishis, establishing, dharma that has been laid down in our texts. So this is where the vital difference comes. A lot of people, think that when they see a war sequence in a particular itihas, they think that, the astra is somehow some kind of, some people associate the Brahmastra with the nuclear bomb and all that. This is given to people with enormous spiritual strength, which is why they undergo tapasya for so many. This is a blessing that has been given to you. There is a mantra associated with each astra. And it is not that you need to have a bow and arrow for it. It's a war, and that is the weapon that's being used. So it is being imbued into an arrow. You can imbue anything you want with this, if you have the power to do it. So the potency of the weapon depends upon your spiritual power. And attaining it is okay, but to maintain that amount and how you use it defines what you become later. So, like a lot of management gurus tell you today, no, it's not the talent that you have, it's the amount of hard work and perseverance that you have, the focus that you have. These are all lessons that you can learn from a Puranas too. You've been given a blessing. You've been, you've undertaken that enormous tapasya and got there. And what happens after that is equally important. That's if you misuse it, you are going to pay the price somewhere. There's no escaping karma at all.
So the similar story is evident in the story of Ramayana also, wherein despite being a devotee of Lord Shiva,
Yes.
Ravana ultimately does involve into a misdeed, and which
Yeah.
eventually leads to the war and the triumph of dharma in the end.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, sir. So earlier in the conversation, sir, you happened to mention that there is a lot more to the character of Parshurama than just being an angry warrior roaming here and there. In that regard only, sir, what would be your thoughts on Tripura Rahasya, the conversation between Guru Dattatreya and Parshurama?
Tripura Rahasya is such a beautiful and such an esoteric text, which there are so many stories in that itself. If I had to sit and try and convey the gist to you, I personally would have to study the text for years before coming and trying to give you something in this. During the first part, the part one of the book, I thought if I included that particular portion of Parshurama's life, first of all, that would be the wrong timeline because that comes later, only after Arjuna is dead. Which is why I kept I didn't bring the presence of the Guru so much in part one, but he is going to be a stronger presence in part two, where there is a samvad between the two of them, and I try to convey this message in a different form, because I can't I don't know how much the younger audience would be interested in having an exposition of dharma between two people. I've tried to put that separately, and I've tried to give you the gist of what that beautiful text is in a sort of a lyric. So I don't know how much I've succeeded in it. So the experts should tell me after once they've read it. So this is a small attempt from my part to tell you that there is a book like this. I've used the words Tripura and Rahasya in part one for different chapters, which is to hint to the reader that there is something here like this, and more on that in part two. So I have written that portion some time back, and I that's one part of part two that I go back and edit, so many times, because I keep thinking that I've missed out something, because that text is so subtle and there's so much learning in that it becomes very difficult for, I'm not a very spiritually evolved person, or, so that can be a blessing and a curse, because it becomes a little difficult for me to convey everything. I can try and put as much as I can, as in an interesting way for the reader. So that is what I'm attempting to do in part two.
So my next question would be a two-part question. So there is a specific section of the book where you happen to mention about the creeds which emanated in that particular era.
Yeah.
So and Arjuna, by the way, has a big role in the evolution of those creeds.
Yeah.
So my first part would be this question only, sir, that how Arjuna's social order of Varna system emanated those creeds into the society.
So when you lock people into something because of their birth and do not allow them to ascend, to reach their full potential, this is going to create a lot of frustration in society. It's going to create a lot of heartburn. You are not, fostering peace there. This is an internal strife. You are good at something. You know that, this is something that you can do better than the people who are doing this now. But you're not allowed to do that because of an accident of birth. It's a very tragic thing if you think about it.
Sorry to interrupt, but what would be Arjuna's motive to bring in such system in the society in the first place?
Yeah. So now Arjuna does not want a challenge to his preeminent position. Now he's a Chakravarti Samrat. There would be a small voice of conscience that tells him that, what he's doing may not exactly be right. You see the change that happens where he's desperately trying to reach out to his guru, and then finally he says, no, it's because the guru, I've outgrown my guru, which is why. So that change happens during the course of the book, and that's where the ego takes over completely. And even when he's given a choice to choose the path of water or the path of fire, there's not even a second's, hesitation before he chooses the path of fire. So, and this is after he thinks he's outgrown his guru. So he wanted to maintain a system where he remains on top. So he was prepared to, ride roughshod over the talents, dreams, aspirations of anybody as long as he remains there. Which is why an avatara was required to bring down a person like this. So enormously powerful, unchallenged. Because I reveal the secret of his strength later towards the climax of the book. So when there is somebody so powerful and he's imposing his will on areas that he should not, you need an avatar to come down and set things right. Like Krishna says, whenever there is a challenge, I will, take avatar repeatedly. So one particular avatar of Mahavishnu had to manifest to put an end to this menace. So when you lock people down, do not allow them the freedom to express their talent, to realize their full potential. This is going to create a lot of unrest in our society. It is adharma in one sense. It is also going to fester in our system for generations to come. You can see that happening even in present day. So they always look for something that can, even if falsely, give them some kind of an aspiration somewhere. Tell them that you are valuable without actually making you valuable. People are very susceptible to that. They show you a mirage, of whatever you want it to be, love, peace, equality. But once you're sucked in and you're not given an exit, because then suddenly the whole philosophy, the theology of your dharma changes. And once you're in there, there is no exit out. So now you're trapped. But you got trapped into that because of something that is here that is, so uncomfortable for you. What happens to people like this? Now, there's a saying that you're caught between the devil and the deep sea. Here you have left one place thinking that, this is something great that's happening there, and now you're caught there and you don't have a path back. What do you do? So Arjuna has put people in a situation like this, and they have become unwilling victims to something. And people who refuse to fall for that mirage are the people who get persecuted. And Arjuna does nothing to help them. So his adharma is in, multiple aspects, not only enabling it, but also ignoring the persecution that happens because of something else rose up there.
My next part of the question, you may choose to avoid it also. In the same section of the creed and the Varna system, there is a mention of Janmarg, Prakash Marg, and Shanti Marg. So does it hold any significance in today's world also? With the contemporary communism, Christianity, and Islam, respectively?
Well, let me explain this from a different angle. Now, there's something that's very wonderful about the dharma that we have, is that we have a sacred feminine. We do not look down on that part of it and say this is sprung from the male or is somehow inferior to the male. All our concepts of Ardhanarishwara or Lakshmi Narayana and all this is Shiva and Shakti, is to show that they are inseparable, they are complementary to each other, and they're equal. Now, when you have theologies and philosophies that go opposite that, what I'm trying to address here is that there is a very popular saying that comes up: God is one, all religions, all paths lead to him. If that is so, then the concept of divinity has to be the same. You cannot have a concept which is completely different from what our dharma tells us and then say that is equally valid. So when Sri Krishna says all paths lead to me, the path that says Krishna is wrong, he does not exist, he's not an avatar, he's just a very clever, I've actually read stuff like this. I'm just quoting from what I've read, very mischievous, cunning man. That path obviously does not lead to him because you're denying his very existence, his very divinity. But people don't think about this. So it's very fashionable to virtue signal this. And like a very popular commentator says, you always punish the fundamentalists, but don't correct the fundamentals. If I can use that phrase, borrowing it from him. Unless you look at the fundamentals, you're not going to realize that, what the others are talking about and what we are talking about are different. Ours is the more wholesome, more complete view. And unless I, contrast this, a lot of young readers are not going to understand. So I had to show them where it is different. There's a particular scene where somebody says, look at the women, they walk abreast with the men, they're walking ahead of the men. Why is that a problem? When Ma Durga is as important, or Ma Gauri is as important as Mahadeva, and where she takes forefront in so many of our stories. Why would one want to put on half of humanity? So I needed that contrast to be given. And while that contrast was given, I wanted to show what does our dharma actually say. How do we define, for want of a better word, our soul, our atma? What is the connection of the jivatma with the paramatma? Why this thing of you only live once, YOLO, does not apply to Hinduism. How does this rebirth and karma go together? I had to put it across in a very simple way, provide a dramatic background to it, and show them how it differs. And the best way to do it is through some action somewhere. And I could use that action to show the contrast between what's happening here. So, which is why I titled that chapter that way. And I would like people to read it before they make, statements like, Vasudeva Kutumbakam and, everything is one. Please pause.
Secularism for that.
Yeah, please read. And then, see, secularism is a concept that we have in India, but originated in the West because they needed to separate the church and the state because of the extraordinary power that the religious establishment held. And which was, they say anti-science, anti-progressive stuff. That wasn't the case here in India. Yes, we did have a faults. There was some, especially when it comes to the caste part of it, that we did have a faults, but we didn't need this superimposed on us to try and, solve the problem and then actually end up compounding it more. I wanted to portray that to readers, especially in India. And I didn't want to beat about the bush, say something. And if you're showing the bad side, also show the good side. I'm not talking about people here. I'm not talking about. I'm trying to show you the fundamentals of different schools of thought which approach divinity, and I wanted to show you how ours was different and worth preserving, which is why Parashurama becomes really aggressive when this happens. So I have his disciple tell you what it actually means, and I show you how Parashurama deals with them because of a particular incident that happened before the speech.
This brings me to my probably second last question for this conversation. So I would like to quote something from the book, sir, for this question. There is a quote in the book which says, if dharma is food, adharma is poison. If you compromise between the two, the only result is a dishonorable death. So can you please elaborate on this statement in order to channelize the youth of Bharat?
Somewhere down the line, no matter what you do, there is always a point beyond which you refuse to go. Most people try and put that down to self-respect, say that this is unwilling, or I can't be doing something like this. This is coming from the self and how you react to something. Our rishis, our philosophy has given you numerous examples of people who are willing to stick up for what is dharma, and they're magnificent examples. I'll just give you one example that springs to mind right now. Unfortunately, this is played as a tragedy. That's the only way I've seen this done, and I'm talking about the story of Raja Harishchandra. The amount of challenges that was thrown that way, and the man did not flinch for once. Even when he was working in that smashan, and he had to uphold the dharma of what had to be what for his own child, he did not compromise. This is played as a tragedy, but this is an enormously heroic tale to me. We've just presented it badly. And that has to be retold in a way that makes, that brings out that character of Raja Harishchandra. So if there are young readers who are looking at this, when you're looking at a point of no compromise and you say this thus far and no further, you have an avatar here, Bhagavan Parashurama, who's not only going to tell you this far, not one step more, he's actually going to tell you 10 steps back. So what are you going to learn from him? Especially at times where, like at the present, where we're facing so many attacks, so much of, wrong notions about who we are as a nation, as Hindus, our culture, our philosophy. You need to draw boundaries, put up red flags and say, okay, if these are the terms coming across my way, I know that, what is the thought behind these statements. This is the line that I will not allow you to cross. This is my sense of self. You are never, ever going to get rid of your identity, no matter how much you deny. The identity exists in other people's eyes. They are always going to judge you with it. It's up to you to understand what it is and own it. And that's what Bhagavan Parashurama teaches you. When you start, once you understand that, the compromise becomes that much harder. You're unwilling to take that slow poison. Once you realize that, you know that imbibing that poison is only going to make you fall in your own eyes. Your first dishonor is there. So nobody's asking you to be violent or aggressive or anything of the sort, but all we are asking you to do is to be aggressive, to understand. Sorry, not be aggressive, to understand. And don't let people define for you what you are supposed to be. Our rishis have done it, our avatars have done it, our holy texts have done it for you. Please read that. So I would only be happy if Rama of the Axe remains just a novel for you, but it pushes you to go read the Puranas, the Itihasa in its unabridged form. Not somebody's version of it. Go to the primary text and read what is there. They will tell you much better than Ranjit ever can who you are, what your ancestors did, why you should be so proud of being a part of this path of Dharma, being born in this country. Own your identity and don't be apologetic about it. I think Bhagavan Parashuram teaches you that. So when you start compromising with that, it's that poison that eats away at your self-respect, eats away at your sense of being. You are mentally, like we say, colonized. You're mentally putting yourself below others. So understand what it is really about, what is actually taught in our philosophy, in our dharma. You would never bow your head down after that.
I'm very sure that the viewers who are going to watch this video, especially the youth, it would be a pivotal stage for them, and then they'll definitely go back and at least give it a thought of reading or getting into details of our own scriptures and Puranas, which is out there and wide open, sir.
This book is merely a homage to what the ancients have left us, and using what little imagination I have, I've presented a story to you so that you're entertained in reading it. But your learning, your understanding will come from the primary source. And I hope this book leads you to it. If that happens, I mean, I can't be, happier than that.
Given the inclination of present days youth and basically their interest, as you said, entertainment. So have you given it a thought of bringing a series or maybe a full-fledged movie on the same subject, probably in the coming years or anything in pipeline?
Luckily for me, when the book came out, I did release a teaser and a trailer. Kicha Sudeep, God bless his soul, he released the teaser for me. He's my brother-in-law, so and he got Ritesh Deshmukh to release the trailer. Thank you to him too. Great support, unknown author, and both of them came out to support me is very big thing. So I believe Ritesh did, message saying that you should try and make this into an OTT series. Don't let it go waste. There have been inquiries, but nothing has come. I haven't signed on anything. We're just still talking about it. But rather than looking at the money part of it and how much, trying to do justice to the story of Parashurama would be the preference. I've seen so many adaptations on TV where he's like this angry guy, red eyes, he's walking around with an axe and he's just, wait, what can I cut next? I don't want that kind of, depiction at all. So I'd like somebody who's interested in presenting the Avatara in this way to approach it. That's a different medium. They have their own ways of adaptation of the book there. That is completely up to them, but I don't want to lose the core of the story. So hopefully there is somebody that that happens. For anyone who's listening, if you are interested in reading, the book is available. Bodega India, Amazon, Flipkart. Thank you so much for having me on Sangam Talks.
Thank you so much for your time, sir.